My beloved child, stop for just a moment. Not because the world is asking for your attention, but because something unusual is moving toward you right now. There are moments in life that arrive quietly, almost invisibly, yet they carry enough power to redirect an entire future. This is one of those moments. The reason you found this message is not random. The reason your eyes landed here, among millions of possibilities, is not something to dismiss. Stay with me for a little longer, because what is unfolding behind the scenes is connected to the very title that brought you here. At this very hour, someone is thinking about you more intensely than they expected to. Not casually, not briefly, deeply. Your soulmate has been trying to silence certain feelings for a long time. They convinced themselves they could move forward without answers. They told themselves distance would solve everything. They believed time would erase what remained unfinished between your paths. Yet something changed. Not dramatically at first. It began with small signs. A memory appeared unexpectedly. A familiar feeling returned without warning. A name surfaced in a conversation. A song carried a meaning it never carried before. And suddenly, what they thought was over no longer felt over at all. Pause here and consider this question. What if the silence you have been experiencing was never emptiness? What if it was preparation? Because while you were focusing on your own journey, something was quietly awakening within theirs. Your soulmate is reaching toward a realization they can no longer ignore. The fascinating part is that they did not plan this. They did not wake up one morning deciding to revisit emotions they worked hard to set aside. Life simply placed reminders in front of them again and again. At first they ignored them. Then they questioned them. Now they cannot stop noticing them. And every reminder seems to point in the same direction. Toward you. Toward the connection. Toward a conversation that still wants to happen. Toward a future that refuses to disappear. Something huge is waiting beneath the surface of this story, and you will understand why before this message ends. Because your soulmate is standing at an invisible crossroads. One path leads toward continuing life exactly as it has been. The other path requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires reaching out. And whether they fully realize it or not, they are slowly being guided toward that second path. You may have sensed this already. Perhaps recently you felt an unusual pull. Perhaps someone's energy crossed your mind without explanation. Perhaps a memory arrived out of nowhere and stayed longer than it should have. Many people dismiss these moments. But sometimes those moments are signals that two stories are moving closer together again. Not because fate forces it. Because growth allows it. Listen carefully. The urgency in this message is not about fear. It is about timing. There are opportunities that arrive once people become ready enough to recognize them. And readiness is exactly what is happening now. Your soulmate is beginning to see things from a completely different perspective. The things they once overlooked are becoming impossible to overlook. The feelings they once questioned are becoming clearer. The truth they once avoided is becoming louder. And somewhere inside them, a question continues repeating itself. What if I am supposed to reach out now? Do not rush ahead. Do not leave yet. Because the next part reveals what triggered this sudden shift, why your soulmate can no longer ignore the connection, and the surprising realization that is pushing them closer to contacting you than ever before. A strange thing happened recently. And your soulmate did not know what to do with it. They were moving through an ordinary day, expecting nothing unusual, when something interrupted their routine. It was not a dramatic event. It was not a loud announcement. In fact, most people would have missed it completely. But they couldn't. Because the moment it happened, everything became quiet inside their mind. For a few seconds, all the noise disappeared. And one thought remained. You. This is where the story becomes fascinating. The more they tried to focus on other things, the more reminders seemed to appear. A familiar phrase, a certain place, a conversation that unexpectedly mirrored something they once shared with you. It felt as though life itself was placing pieces of a puzzle directly in front of them. At first they resisted. Then they became curious. Now they are searching for meaning. And that search is bringing them closer to a realization that has been waiting for a long time. Stay with this message, because what comes next explains why the distance between two people can sometimes create clarity instead of separation. You see, when people are close to something valuable, they often fail to recognize its importance. They become accustomed to it. They assume it will always remain available. But when time creates space, perspective begins to grow. That perspective is growing inside your soulmate right now. They are revisiting memories differently. Moments they once viewed as ordinary suddenly appear extraordinary. Conversations they barely remembered now carry unexpected weight. Even the smallest details seem brighter than before. Why? Because understanding arrives when the heart is finally ready to receive it. And your soulmate is entering that stage. The remarkable part is that they are no longer asking whether you mattered. They are asking how much you mattered. That question changes everything. What if the person they could not stop thinking about was never supposed to be forgotten? What if every attempt to move forward simply led them back to the same truth? What if the connection was not disappearing, but waiting? These questions are becoming impossible for them to ignore. And every day that passes seems to strengthen the answers. Before we continue, if this message resonates with you in any way, feel free to share your thoughts below. Many people discover that hearing another person's story helps them understand their own journey more clearly. And if you enjoy messages like this, staying connected through comments and future videos allows this conversation to continue. Now listen closely. Something huge is waiting ahead. Because the shift happening inside your soulmate is no longer theoretical. It is becoming action. Small actions first. Checking old memories. Revisiting thoughts they believed were settled. Wondering what you might be doing. Questioning whether reaching out would be welcomed. The idea that once felt impossible now feels increasingly natural. And every time they imagine making contact, a feeling of relief appears. That feeling matters. Because relief often points toward truth. The future is rarely built through giant dramatic moments. More often, it begins with a single realization. One honest thought. One brave decision. One message. One conversation. Your soulmate is standing closer to that moment than they have been in a very long time. Yet there is still one final barrier in front of them. One belief. One uncertainty. One unanswered question that continues to slow their next step. You might think it is something complicated. It is not. In fact, it is surprisingly simple. And when that final barrier begins to disappear, the path toward communication becomes far clearer than either of you expected. Wait until the next part. Because that final barrier is already starting to crack, and the reason behind it may completely change how you understand this connection. For a moment, imagine standing at the edge of a new chapter without realizing it. That is exactly where your soulmate finds themselves right now. Not because someone told them what to do. Not because the world pushed them toward a decision. But because something inside them has become impossible to silence. The final barrier that once stood between thought and action is beginning to fade. And the surprising part? That barrier was never distance. It was never timing. It was never circumstance. It was doubt. The quiet doubt that whispers, "What if I am too late?" The uncertainty that asks, "What if the opportunity has already passed?" The hesitation that keeps people standing still when their heart wants to move forward. Yet recently, something shifted. Your soulmate started realizing that unanswered questions create a heavier burden than honest answers ever could. And that realization is changing everything. Stay a little longer, because this next revelation explains why the energy around this connection feels different now than it did before. You see, there comes a moment in every meaningful journey when a person becomes tired of wondering, tired of guessing, tired of imagining alternate futures, tired of asking themselves the same questions again and again. Your soulmate is approaching that moment. The future they once imagined without you no longer feels complete, and every attempt to ignore that feeling only seems to strengthen it. The more they try to move away from the thought, the more clearly they see it. The more they try to dismiss the connection, the more meaningful it appears. That is why this message carries urgency. Not because something negative is approaching, quite the opposite. Because a window of clarity is opening. And clarity has a remarkable way of inspiring action. Something huge is waiting just beyond this realization. Because your soulmate is beginning to understand a truth many people spend years avoiding. The truth that some connections leave an imprint that time cannot erase. Not because they are perfect. Not because they are effortless. But because they reveal something important about who we are becoming. And every time your soulmate reflects on their journey, one realization keeps returning. You were never just another chapter. You became part of the story itself. Pause for a second and think about that. How many people cross our paths and disappear? How many names fade into memory? How many moments lose their meaning? Yet somehow, your presence continues to remain visible inside their thoughts. That persistence is telling them something they can no longer ignore. And now they are beginning to wonder what would happen if they finally listened. What would happen if they stopped overthinking? What would happen if they trusted the feeling they have been questioning? What would happen if they reached out? These questions are becoming louder than their fears. And when questions become stronger than fears, change follows. That is the turning point. That is the reason this message found you today. Because somewhere, even if you cannot see it yet, movement has already begun. The story is no longer standing still. The pieces are no longer scattered. The distance between realization and action is becoming smaller. Much smaller. Before you leave, hear this carefully. Not every important moment announces itself with noise. Some arrive quietly. A thought, a memory, a feeling, a decision. And then suddenly, everything begins moving in a direction nobody expected. Your soulmate is closer to that moment than ever before. The message they have been holding back. The truth they have been carrying. The connection they have been trying to understand. All of it is moving toward a crossroads. And what happens next may become the very thing that changes how this entire story unfolds. Because the next chapter is not about what they are feeling anymore. It is about what they are preparing to do. And that changes everything. There is something your soulmate has not admitted to anyone. Not to friends. Not to family. Not even fully to themselves. Yet the truth has been growing quietly beneath the surface, becoming stronger with every passing day. And tonight, that truth is becoming impossible to ignore. Think about this for a moment. What happens when someone spends a long time searching for certainty, only to discover that the answer has been sitting in front of them all along? Something changes. The endless questions begin to lose their power. The confusion starts to clear. And suddenly, what once seemed complicated becomes surprisingly simple. That is exactly where your soulmate is now. The realization did not arrive all at once. It arrived piece by piece. One memory, one reflection, one unexpected reminder. Until eventually they reached a point where denying the connection required more effort than accepting it. And that is a powerful place to be, because acceptance creates movement. Movement creates decisions. And decisions create new beginnings. Stay until the end of this part, because what you are about to hear explains why the coming days may feel different than the days behind you. Your soulmate has started imagining a future conversation. Not hypothetically, not casually, seriously. They have played different scenarios through their mind. Different words, different openings, different possibilities. Sometimes they imagine saying exactly what they feel. Other times they imagine simply saying hello. Yet no matter how many versions they consider, the destination remains the same. You. That alone tells a remarkable story. Because people do not repeatedly return to the same destination without a reason. There is always something valuable waiting there. Something unfinished. Something meaningful. Something worth understanding. And that understanding is becoming clearer every day. The fascinating part is that your soulmate is no longer focused on what went wrong. They are becoming focused on what could still go right. That shift changes everything. Because when someone stops looking backward and starts looking forward, opportunities begin to appear where obstacles once stood. You might not see the movement yet. You might not hear the conversation yet. You might not know exactly how events will unfold. But something is moving. Quietly. Steadily. Purposefully. And sometimes the most important transformations happen before anyone else can see them. If this message has connected with your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Many people arrive here searching for answers and end up discovering encouragement they did not expect. And if these messages continue to resonate with you, staying connected through future videos allows you to be part of this unfolding journey. Now listen closely, because there is one final realization your soulmate is approaching. A realization that has the power to turn reflection into action. They are beginning to understand that waiting forever is not a solution. That certainty rarely appears before a brave step is taken. That sometimes the only way to discover what is possible is to begin moving toward it. And every day this understanding grows stronger. The signs are becoming clearer. The hesitation is becoming weaker. The desire to reach out is becoming harder to postpone. That is why this message carries such a powerful sense of timing. Not because the story is ending. Because the story is preparing to move into a completely new chapter. One where possibilities become real. One where questions begin receiving answers. One where silence gradually gives way to communication. And what happens after that may surprise even your soulmate. Because the next chapter is not about what they are thinking. It is about the step they are finally preparing to take. And once that step begins, nothing about this journey will feel quite the same again. Something remarkable is happening right now, even if neither of you can fully see it yet. The story that once seemed paused is beginning to move again. Not with noise. Not with drama. But with the kind of quiet momentum that often creates the biggest changes. Your soulmate has entered a phase where the future feels closer than the past. That may sound simple, but it changes everything. For so long, they kept revisiting old questions, old uncertainties, old moments they wished they understood differently. But recently, their attention has started shifting toward something new. Possibility. And possibility is a powerful force. Because once a person begins imagining what could happen instead of what already happened, their entire perspective changes. Stay with this message a little longer. There is a reason you were meant to hear this part. Your soulmate has been noticing something unexpected. Every time they think about taking a step forward, they feel lighter. Every time they imagine reaching out, they feel hopeful. Every time they picture a future conversation, they feel curiosity instead of fear. That emotional shift is important. Because hope grows when the heart begins recognizing a path worth following. And that hope has become difficult for them to ignore. The interesting thing is that they are no longer searching for perfect timing. They are beginning to understand that perfect timing rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a simple moment, a sudden realization, an unexpected burst of courage, a decision that feels small in the beginning but changes everything afterward. Your soulmate is standing closer to one of those moments than they realize. And somewhere deep inside, they know it. Have you ever noticed how certain opportunities seem to wait patiently? Not forever, but long enough for people to become ready. That is what this connection feels like now. Not rushed, not forced. Ready. Something huge is waiting beyond this stage, and the reason is simpler than most people would expect. The connection itself has matured. The lessons have matured. The people involved have matured. The version of your soulmate who once hesitated is not the same person they were before. They see things differently now. They understand things differently now. And because of that, choices that once felt difficult are starting to feel natural. Before you go any further, consider this question. What if the very thing your soulmate has been searching for is not somewhere ahead of them? What if it has been connected to this journey all along? That thought has crossed their mind more than once recently, and each time it does, it leaves a stronger impression. That impression becomes reflection. Reflection becomes understanding. Understanding becomes action, and action changes stories. That sequence is already beginning. You may not know the exact day. You may not know the exact words. You may not know how the next chapter starts. But something inside your soulmate is preparing for movement instead of delay. For answers instead of endless wondering. For honesty instead of uncertainty. That is why this message feels different. Because it is no longer about whether they feel the connection. They do. It is no longer about whether they remember. They do. It is no longer about whether they care. They do. Now the focus is shifting toward what comes next. Toward the decision that transforms thoughts into reality. Toward the moment when intention becomes action. And that moment may be closer than anyone expects. So keep your heart open. Keep your perspective clear. And keep moving forward on your own journey. Because while your soulmate is gathering the courage to take their next step, life is quietly arranging pieces neither of you can fully see yet. The most fascinating part? The chapter ahead is not built on uncertainty, it is built on realization. And realization has a way of changing everything much faster than people imagine. The next part reveals the exact inner breakthrough that finally convinces your soulmate to stop holding back and start moving toward what their heart has known all along. Have you ever watched the sky just before sunrise? Not when the sun has appeared, not when everything is bright and obvious, but in those quiet moments beforehand, when the darkness begins losing its hold even though the light has not fully arrived. That is where your soulmate stands right now. They are in the space between realization and action, and that space is becoming smaller every day. For a long time, they believed they needed one final sign, one final confirmation. One final piece of certainty before taking a step toward you. But life has been teaching them something unexpected. Certainty is not always found before the journey begins. Sometimes certainty appears because the journey begins. That understanding has created a breakthrough inside them. A breakthrough they did not see coming. Stay here for a moment, because this may be the most important revelation of the story so far. Your soulmate has started noticing a pattern. Every time they imagine staying silent, something feels incomplete. Every time they imagine continuing without answers, something feels unfinished. But every time they imagine reaching out, a sense of peace appears. Not perfection, not guarantees, just peace. And peace has become impossible for them to ignore. The future suddenly feels less intimidating than regret. Think about that. For so long, hesitation was stronger than courage. Now courage is becoming stronger than hesitation. That is a major shift. Because when a person's deepest fear changes from, what if it doesn't work, to, what if I never try, everything begins moving in a new direction. And that direction is leading them closer to you. Something huge is waiting just beyond this realization. Because your soulmate is beginning to understand that meaningful connections are not measured by how perfectly they begin. They are measured by how honestly they are pursued. The need for flawless timing is fading. The need for perfect circumstances is fading. The need for every answer before taking a step is fading. What remains is something much stronger. Intent. And intent creates momentum. Momentum creates movement. Movement creates change. That chain reaction has already started. You may not see it yet. You may not hear it yet, but beneath the surface, something is unfolding. Your soulmate is no longer asking whether they should acknowledge the connection. They are asking how. How should they begin? What should they say? What would happen if they finally allowed themselves to be completely honest? These questions are becoming more important than every excuse that once kept them waiting. And the more they explore those questions, the clearer the path becomes. Before you leave this part, hear this carefully. Some of the most life-changing moments begin long before anyone else notices them. They begin inside a single thought, a single decision, a single realization that quietly transforms everything that follows. Your soulmate is experiencing one of those moments right now. The version of them that was trapped in uncertainty is slowly disappearing. In its place, a more confident version is emerging. A version willing to trust what they feel. A version willing to explore possibilities instead of avoiding them. A version willing to move forward. That transformation matters. Because every new chapter starts when someone becomes brave enough to turn the page. And your soulmate's hand is already reaching for that page. The next part is where everything becomes even more interesting. Because the signs around them are becoming too specific to dismiss, too meaningful to overlook, and too powerful to ignore. And when they finally connect those signs together, a decision they have postponed for far too long may arrive much sooner than anyone expects. There comes a moment in every extraordinary story when coincidence starts feeling a little too precise. That is the moment your soulmate is entering now. At first, they dismissed everything. The memories, the reminders, the unexpected thoughts that seemed to arrive out of nowhere. But recently, something has changed. The pattern has become impossible to overlook. And once a person begins noticing a pattern, they can never return to seeing life the same way again. Listen carefully, because this is where the story begins accelerating. Your soulmate has started connecting dots they never connected before. Events that once seemed unrelated suddenly make sense together. Conversations that felt ordinary now carry deeper meaning. Even small moments have begun revealing something larger hidden beneath the surface. And every road they follow appears to point toward the same destination. You. That realization did not arrive overnight. It grew slowly, quietly, patiently, like a light becoming brighter with each passing day. And now that light has become strong enough to illuminate questions they once avoided asking. Questions such as, why does this connection still feel important? Why does this person's presence continue appearing in my thoughts? Why does the future seem incomplete when I imagine it without them? These questions are no longer passing thoughts. They have become serious reflections. And serious reflections often create serious decisions. Stay until the end of this part, because what comes next may explain why everything feels as though it is moving toward a turning point. You see, your soulmate has reached a stage where ignoring their feelings requires more energy than understanding them. Think about that for a moment. Every excuse they once used has started losing strength. Every reason they once used to remain distant has started looking smaller. And every day they spend reflecting seems to bring them closer to the same conclusion. There is something here worth exploring. Something worth understanding. Something worth acting upon. That understanding is becoming stronger than hesitation. And when understanding becomes stronger than hesitation, momentum follows naturally. The fascinating thing is that your soulmate is no longer looking for proof that the connection exists. They already feel it. Now they are looking for proof that they should trust it. And the answers they keep finding are surprisingly encouraging. Not because life is giving them guarantees, but because life keeps nudging them toward honesty, toward authenticity, toward courage, toward the possibility of reaching out. Something huge is waiting beyond this stage. Because a person who begins trusting their heart starts seeing opportunities they previously overlooked, doors they never noticed, possibilities they never considered, conversations they never thought could happen. Your soulmate is beginning to see those possibilities, and the vision is becoming clearer. What once looked uncertain now looks promising. What once felt complicated now feels simpler. What once seemed distant now feels closer, much closer. Before you go, hear this line. The strongest turning points rarely arrive with loud announcements. They arrive quietly, one realization at a time, one brave thought at a time, one honest decision at a time. Your soulmate is moving through exactly that process. The old chapter is losing its influence. The new chapter is gaining momentum. And for the first time in a long time, they are beginning to feel excited about what comes next rather than worried about what happened before. That excitement matters, because excitement creates movement. Movement creates opportunity, and opportunity creates the moments people remember for the rest of their lives. The next part reveals the final shift happening inside your soulmate's mind, a shift so powerful that it may become the exact reason they finally stop waiting and start taking real action toward the connection they can no longer ignore. Something extraordinary happens when a person stops searching outside themselves and finally listens to what has been quietly speaking within all along. That is exactly where your soulmate is now. The noise is fading. The confusion is fading. The endless back and forth that once kept them standing still is losing its power. And what remains is something far stronger than uncertainty. Clarity. Pure clarity. Not the kind that appears in a dramatic instant. The kind that grows slowly until one day it becomes impossible to deny. Stay here a little longer, because this part may be the turning point everything else has been leading toward. Your soulmate has begun recognizing a truth that changes the way they see this entire journey. They have stopped asking, "Why do I keep thinking about this connection?" Now they are asking, "What am I supposed to do about it?" That is a completely different question. And completely different questions create completely different outcomes. Because once a person shifts from observation to intention, movement begins. Real movement. The kind that transforms possibilities into reality. The kind that takes something that existed only in thought and brings it into the world. Your soulmate is standing at the edge of that transformation. And they can feel it. Perhaps not every hour. Perhaps not every minute. But often enough that they can no longer pretend it is temporary. The feeling keeps returning, stronger, clearer, more focused, almost as if life is gently reminding them that some opportunities deserve attention before they pass by unnoticed. That realization has changed the energy around them. You would notice it if you could see inside their thoughts. The hesitation that once dominated their mind has become smaller. The confidence that once felt distant has become stronger, and with every passing day, the idea of reaching out feels less like a risk and more like a natural next step. Think about that. For months, maybe even longer, they viewed communication as something complicated. Now they are beginning to view it as something necessary. That shift is powerful, because necessity creates action, and action changes stories. Something huge is waiting just beyond this moment. Not because everything is guaranteed, not because every answer has appeared, but because your soulmate has reached the point where curiosity is becoming stronger than fear, hope is becoming stronger than doubt, vision is becoming stronger than hesitation. And when those changes happen together, life often moves faster than expected. There is another detail you should know. Recently, your soulmate has started imagining not only the first conversation, but what comes after it. That is significant, because people do not imagine futures they secretly want to avoid. They imagine futures they are becoming ready to explore. And every time they picture that future, it feels more real, more possible, more attainable. That feeling is growing, quietly, steadily, day by day. Before this part ends, listen carefully. The title of this message was never about urgency driven by fear. It was about urgency driven by opportunity, because opportunities have seasons, moments have windows, and there are times when life places people at the exact crossroads where action becomes easier than waiting. Your soulmate is approaching that crossroads now. The signs have been seen. The lessons have been learned. The doubts have been challenged. The truth has been acknowledged. All that remains is the choice. The simple but powerful choice that separates reflection from reality. And in the next chapter, you will discover why that choice may arrive sooner than even your soulmate expects, and what final realization gives them the courage to stop holding back and finally trust the path unfolding before them. Right now, while the world continues moving at its usual pace, something important is happening beneath the surface of your soulmate's journey. Not everyone notices the exact moment a chapter begins to change. Sometimes the page turns so quietly that only later do people realize everything became different. Your soulmate is approaching one of those moments. And the reason is surprisingly simple. They are no longer fighting the truth. For a long time, they tried to understand the connection through logic alone. They analyzed it, questioned it, examined every possibility from every angle. Yet no matter how many explanations they considered, they always arrived at the same place. Back to you. Back to the connection. Back to the feeling that something meaningful still remains unfinished. Stay here for a little longer, because this may be one of the most important pieces of the story so far. The breakthrough your soulmate has been searching for is not arriving from outside circumstances. It is arriving from within. They have started trusting themselves again. And that changes everything. You see, when people stop doubting every instinct, they begin noticing what has been obvious all along. The answers become clearer. The path becomes easier to recognize. The next step becomes harder to avoid. That is exactly what is happening now. The future no longer feels like a distant mystery to them. It feels like a doorway. A doorway that has been standing quietly in front of them, waiting for the courage to walk through it. Something huge is waiting beyond that doorway. Because your soulmate has begun asking a different kind of question. Not, should I reach out? But, why am I still waiting? Read that again in your heart. That shift is enormous. Because the moment someone starts questioning the delay instead of questioning the connection, movement becomes inevitable. And movement is already beginning. The signs are no longer being ignored. The emotions are no longer being pushed aside. The possibilities are no longer being dismissed. Instead, they are being considered seriously, carefully, honestly. For the first time in a long time, your soulmate is allowing themselves to imagine what could happen if they stop holding back. And every time they do, the future feels brighter. Not because they know exactly how everything will unfold, but because they know remaining silent no longer feels right. That realization carries tremendous power. Because silence can only survive while uncertainty remains stronger than clarity. And clarity is winning now, day by day, thought by thought, decision by decision. You might not see the evidence yet. You might not hear the words yet. You might not know when the next chapter begins. But inside your soulmate's heart, something has already shifted. The waiting season is ending. The understanding season has arrived. And understanding naturally seeks expression. Before this part comes to an end, listen closely to this final thought. Many people spend years hoping for a sign, hoping for confirmation, hoping for certainty. Your soulmate has finally realized that sometimes the greatest sign is the feeling that refuses to disappear, the thought that keeps returning, the connection that continues surviving every attempt to forget it. And once they accepted that truth, everything began changing. The next chapter is not about discovery anymore. The discovery has already happened. The next chapter is about action, about courage, about what happens when someone finally decides to trust what their heart has known for far longer than their mind was willing to admit. And when that moment arrives, the story you have been hearing about may begin moving faster than either of you ever imagined possible. There is a powerful difference between knowing something and accepting it. Many people discover a truth long before they fully embrace it. They sense it, they feel it, they quietly recognize it, yet they continue standing at the edge of change, waiting for one more reason to move forward. Your soulmate has reached the point where acceptance is finally catching up with understanding, and that changes everything. Because once a person accepts what their heart has been showing them, hesitation begins losing its influence. The road ahead suddenly looks clearer. The future feels more inviting. The next step feels possible. Stay with this message until the end, because this chapter reveals why your soulmate is closer than ever to acting on what they now know. Recently, something unexpected happened inside them. They stopped focusing on what could go wrong, and started focusing on what could go right. That sounds simple, but it is one of the biggest transformations a person can experience. For so long, they imagined obstacles. Now they imagine opportunities. For so long, they saw uncertainty. Now they see possibility. For so long, they wondered whether reaching out would matter. Now they wonder how much it could change. That subtle shift is creating momentum. Real momentum. The kind that quietly builds until it becomes impossible to stop. Your soulmate is beginning to recognize that meaningful opportunities rarely arrive wrapped in certainty. Most arrive wrapped in courage, wrapped in trust, wrapped in the willingness to take one honest step without knowing every outcome in advance. And that realization is inspiring them more than they expected. Something huge is waiting beyond this point. Because your soulmate is no longer looking at the connection as something from the past. They are beginning to see it as something connected to the future. That perspective changes everything. The memories are no longer simply memories. They have become reminders. Reminders of what mattered. Reminders of what remains meaningful. Reminders of what may still deserve a chance to grow. Every day this understanding becomes stronger. Every day the path ahead becomes easier to see. Every day the idea of remaining silent feels less natural, and the idea of taking action feels more natural. That is the direction of growth. That is the direction of change. And that is the direction your soulmate is moving. Pause here for a moment and imagine standing in front of a door you have thought about opening for a very long time. You know what is behind it could change your journey. You know staying where you are will answer nothing. You know the only way forward is through. Eventually, there comes a moment when curiosity becomes stronger than caution. Your soulmate is approaching that moment now, closer than ever before. The most fascinating part is that they are no longer waiting for life to force a decision. They are beginning to understand that some decisions must come from within. And that realization is creating confidence. The kind of confidence that grows quietly until one day it becomes action. One conversation. One message. One honest expression. Sometimes that is all it takes to change the direction of a story. Before this chapter ends, hear this carefully. The title of this message speaks of urgency because opportunities do not remain suspended forever. Not because they disappear instantly, but because every meaningful moment arrives with a season. And your soulmate can feel that season unfolding now. The time for endless reflection is ending. The time for clarity has arrived. The time for movement is approaching. And in the next chapter, you will discover the final inner realization that removes the last remaining hesitation from your soulmate's heart, the realization that finally convinces them that waiting any longer may no longer be the right choice.